Coming up on this episode of the NHL At the Rink podcast, we talk all things Stanley Cup final. We got a 1-1 series. Edmonton and Florida have been two of the best games we've seen. We talked to Jonah Gadjevich from the Florida Panthers. Great stuff. Got to listen for his beard comments as well. And we go over some of the coaching moves in the league. All of that and more coming up on this episode of the NHL At the Rink podcast.
NHL At the Rink is presented by Skip, the official food delivery app of the NHL.
Welcome into another episode of the NHL At the Rink podcast presented by Skip. Skip to the good part. Get groceries, meals, and essentials delivered right to your door on Skip. Sean and I, we are recording on Sunday. It is after Game 2, before Game 3 of this Stanley Cup final. We're at Baptist Health Iceplex in Fort Lauderdale, the home of the Florida Panthers. And we've got ourselves a series, Sean.
We do. First of all, this is the coldest place in Florida, so I may live here.
You didn't want to walk. Let's just put it out there. Okay, it's hot. But Emily Benjamin and I, we walked here. It's literally less than a mile. It's a 10-minute walk. Sean walked outside and made the joke. I don't know if it was a joke, but he made the joke that it's 900 Kelvin outside. And he would have been sweating profusely had he walked to the rink. So he did not.
It's not even the temperature, dude. It's the humidity. It's 180% humidity. It's like a wet blanket outside. But that's okay. It's the Stanley Cup final, and we all power through in our own way. So I'm sure I'll walk at some point. It just wasn't going to be today. But look, we flew here after two of the greatest games. I've been covering the Stanley Cup final, every final since 2000, and I did a couple in the mid-90s. It'd be hard for me to think of two games that were better. I could think of games that were better, but not back-to-back like these two games have been.
Almost three games. We joke in the media about how, you root for yourself because you want good storylines, you want good games, and you want no overtime. But I wasn't upset with overtime in either one of these games. They've been fantastic. I couldn't agree with you more. These two games in Edmonton have been some of the most well-played NHL games that I have seen. You're not seeing big mistakes. It's just not happening. If a mistake happens, it's not necessarily a mistake. I think of Brad Marchand on the breakaway, right? I mean, it's a shot from Matthias Ekholm that just takes a bad bounce, and everybody's pushing up, and the puck, Marchand makes a great read. So that's how it's not a mistake on the Oilers' part. At least I don't think. I think it's an aggressiveness on the Oilers' part to try to win a game. And Nosek in overtime in Game 1, people will say that's a mistake on his part. It's unfortunate. I don't think it's a mistake. He just missed the glass. I mean, he's trying to make a play and he misses the glass. But these have been two of the most well-played games. They've been back and forth. No lead is safe. The Oilers have had to come back both times in the third period. But, Sean, I do think as we transfer the series here to South Florida for Game 3, as much as the Oilers love the way they played, and they should, I think they leave Edmonton feeling we missed a big chance. We missed a chance. Even though they came back in the third period both times, they missed a chance to take a 2-0 lead in this series. And if this is a 2-0 lead, man, we're talking about different things here right now.
Yeah, but I think it also showed them or reminded them who they're playing, right? Because you look at this as a heavyweight fight, right? And there's going to be punches landed, head shots, and body shots that are going to stagger teams. Edmonton landed 2 knockout blows, right? To come back in Game 1 and then score that late in overtime, that's a crusher, right? And you're like, well, what's Florida going to do? And then they come back in Game 2. Corey Perry scores the latest tying goal in the history of Stanley Cup final because, of course, Corey Perry does, because that guy just does things that nobody else can do. And again, you're like, oh, there it is. That's the one that's going to put the champion on the mat. Nope. And now they're home, and they have home ice now. 5 games left, and they have home ice. And it's 0-0 at this point. You can take all of it. And I think these two teams, look, these are the same teams that played last year. They're not the same teams. The Florida Panthers are champions. They learned the lessons they needed to learn. And the Edmonton Oilers have shown in these first 2 games that they are an incrementally better team than the one that played the Florida Panthers last year.
Oh, without question. There's familiarity. The cores are the same. The game plans are the same. The systems are the same. But the teams are better. There is no question about it. By the way, we're going to have, from the Panthers forward, Jonah Gadjevich is going to be joining us here shortly. He's playing a little bit in this final. He was a Black Ace last year. So Gadjevich joins us for just a terrific conversation with him. But you're right. Listen, the Oilers are a much better team. The thing that, if I'm the Panthers, that almost excites, that excites me and makes me feel like we're in a really good spot too, is it's a 1-1 series, and Alexander Barkov has not been heard from yet, and Sam Reinhart has not been heard from yet. Now, Sam Reinhart almost was heard from in the overtime of Game 2. He missed on a breakaway. Happens. Bad miss, by the way. But it happens. But Barkov, he's a -4, which is, that's uncharacteristic of Alexander Barkov. But he's doing so many things. He's winning faceoffs. He's won a ton of faceoffs. And he hasn't been heard from yet offensively. No points for the first 2 games. And it's just 2 games, so let's not go crazy here. But to me, that's a sign for Florida, like, you know what? Our best player has not factored in on the score sheet yet, and odds are he will, right? So that's a good sign for Florida.
Yeah, and I talked to Brad Marchand, the Panthers skated here today to get ready for Game 3, and I said, do you guys, because of Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl and the offensive power, he said this is the best offensive team we've played all year. I said, Brad, do you have to reimagine what success is? Right? Because every player looks at his numbers and likes, that's good, that's bad. I'm sure Barkov looks at -4 and it makes him sick. But it's -4 being force-fed Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl, where other guys are going to be -8 or -10. So I think it is almost where you have to retrain your brain. He's like, we're not going to stop these guys. Like, that's not possible. Look at their numbers. Nobody stops them. We need to contain them. And I think Alexander Barkov has done a lot of that. There's been long periods of time that Connor McDavid hasn't been heard from in this series. He just has these moments of brilliance. The pass, which he still won't say who the pass was to, that Ekholm scores on, whether that was to the guy in front or
I think
to
that
Ekholm.
pass was to Evander Kane.
Yeah. And then the play he made on the goal in Game 2 where he just weaved through everybody like that's a signature moment in the Stanley Cup playoffs, and nobody's stopping that. You could put the last 5 Selke winners on the ice together, and at times Connor McDavid's just going to beat him because that's who he is. So, I think they look at it a little differently. They know what Alexander Barkov brings to the table, and expectations have to be readjusted.
I agree with you on that. And you mentioned Connor McDavid. There's been long stretches where he hasn't really been heard from. I don't know about long. I mean, this guy is playing he's at another level already, right? We know that. Best player, no question about it. But to me, every time he's on the ice, there's something. Like, there's something you've got to watch for. And whether it's just the crossovers and he just gets himself going, or a back check, like the back checks now that he's been doing, every time he's on the ice, he's doing some amazing things in my estimation. And when they put him and Leon Draisaitl together, like, I don't know how you deal with that. Like, to me, I just don't get how it's even stopped. It shows you the level of play we're at here, that the Florida Panthers aren't allowing a goal every single time those two guys are on the ice. Because I got to tell you, maybe not every single time, there's a lot of teams in this league who probably would allow a goal 50% of the times that those guys are on the ice, and it's not happening with Florida. It really shows the level. But, man, Sean, McDavid was great last year in the playoffs. Won the Conn Smythe as a losing player, on a losing team. I didn't think he could get better because he's that good. He's better. Like, it's amazing to watch this guy. And for fans out there, like, if you're tuning in, he's different. You just look at it. He's just different. And we are being treated to some of the greatest individual hockey play that we've ever seen, and in my estimation, will ever see.
Well, I think one of the biggest differences is that Leon Draisaitl is healthy. He wasn't last year.
It's true.
He didn't score last year in the final. He had a few assists. He wasn't healthy. He had multiple injuries that came out after the season. he's in a better place now. He has 3 goals in the first 2 games, same as Sam Bennett. Not the same player. Leon Draisaitl and Sam Bennett, they're a little bit different styles. One's going to score from outside. The other one's going to score while he's touching the goalie. And but I think that helps him, right? Not only when they're together. When they're together, then he can feed off of him, and he knows that Leon can make plays. But there's more fear in trying to match Leon Draisaitl when he's on a different line. And to me, the chess match between Paul Maurice and Chris Knobloch has been unbelievable. You know, we talk about the players, and it is about the players, but the coaches are putting these players in the best position to succeed. And I thought, you know, watching Chris in games 1 and 2 try and get the advantages that home ice and last change allows you to have was fascinating, and Paul trying to counter that. And we're going to talk to Gadjevich, like you said, and you know, there were a lot of times when they tried to put Connor and Leon after icings and stoppages against the lower line guys against the Panthers, and they've had to eat that, right? And it's really has been fascinating to watch. And now Paul gets the chance because he's got the same thing. He's got lines that he thinks can dominate, that he can put against lower line guys. And the difference is Edmonton's bottom 6 completely different and far superior than the one that played in last year's final.
Oh, 100, absolutely. That's why they're a better team. I mean, that right there is probably the biggest reason why they are a better team. You know what I found, though? So we're through 2 games. As I think about and I look ahead to game 3, and even though the series flips, I'm not – usually we find areas where, like, well, the Panthers got to be better in this area, right? Or the Oilers, if they want to get the win, well, they got to be better here. I don't find that. And it's a testament to the level of play. But – because you look ahead to game 3, Sean, I mean, what makes the difference in this series? It's so thin. The margins are so thin that I couldn't even tell you, other than special teams, which is obvious, and goaltending, which is obvious, what really will flip, where the Panthers have to be better to get a win, where the Oilers have to be better. That's the analysis you always look at. It's not easy to find in this series.
No, and I think it is special teams. I think it's specifically power play, right?
Yeah.
The Edmonton Oilers have power play goals in each game. But again, it's redefining success because it's the Edmonton Oilers. In game 2, they had a 5-on-3, and they couldn't score. They needed a goal there. And then they lose, and then they give up a shorthanded goal to Brad Marchand. Like, that's the difference right there. That power play is a difference maker, and it hasn't been. It's caused some damage, but it hasn't put the Panthers away yet, and that's what it's designed to do.
And I think it was after game 1, Paul Maurice was asked about the penalty kill, what he thought of it for the Panthers penalty kill. He said it was all right. And a lot of times you're not going to be accepting of all right. But against these guys, you'll take all right.
Yeah.
Because – listen, I mean, and we've heard this time and again in this series from Chris Knobloch, from Paul Maurice. You're just not going to be able to dominate. It's too good. You're just not going to be able to dominate, you know, for long stretches of time. It'll be surprising if that happens. So definitely special teams. You know, obviously it's always goaltending. And listen, Stuart Skinner, I think he had a rough start in game 1, but he's been pretty solid. I mean, Sergei Bobrovsky, you know, both goalies have given up goals. And you'd look at it and you'd say the goaltending's been pretty good, right? I mean, they've given up goals. It's not been a lack of goal scoring in this series, but the goaltending has been really good in this series in spite of that. One thing I noticed in game 1 that I think the Oilers did a better job of in game 2 is I thought they were giving up the middle of the ice a little too much in game 1. Sam Bennett in particular was taking that middle of the ice, knifing through, and I think they closed that down. Their gaps were a little bit better in game 2, but again, we're looking at things like it's nitpicking little details because the level of play has been so high. So the physicality has been high too. And one of the things that is still the thing to watch for me in this series is, can the level of physicality stay where it's at without somebody going over the line? And if that can make, then then it leads right to what you were talking about, special teams. So far, that really has not happened. But if it does, that's where this series could shift. Yeah, and I think the difference is Edmonton's trying to initiate more this
this year. You know, they have guys. Evander Kane's healthy. He was dealing with multiple injuries.
He only
last
played
year.
in 2 games last year.
And he was not effective, right? He wasn't playing his game. And they're bigger and they're stronger and they're more willing to play that game. And at times, you know, when the playoffs started and they had media day, I believe it was one of the Canadian-based writers talked about the dark arts that the Florida Panthers practice, like they're Mr. Fuji. The Edmonton Oilers,
They got some dark arts.
they got some dark arts. They got Corey Perry, they got Evander Kane, and they're trying. You know, again, it was Brad Marchand. He's like, you see the game they're playing. They're trying to sucker us into taking stupid penalties, and that's going to kill us. And everybody's held their cool. They're cool. Like, at one point, Matthew Tkachuk was laughing as people were trying to engage with him. And that's almost worse, right? When you're trying to pick a fight with somebody and they just laugh at you and walk away. Like, you're steaming and then you're going to take a penalty. But nobody's done it. And both games, after some very early message sending, have settled into no special teams at all.
Yeah.
They've been played at 5-on-5 well into the overtimes. The only penalties that have been taken were not physical penalties. They were delay games and everything else. So, you know, and I think both teams understand, I'm hitting you now, not for now.
Yep.
Because it's so close, we're going to play a game 7, and the 19 times I hit you from games 1 to 6 maybe slows you by that fraction of an inch that's going to give me the advantage in game 7.
Well, it goes back to the video clip of Paul Maurice on the bench. I think it was against the Bruins last year, where he was saying, and in his salty language, of course, like, you know, forget about the plays. Go hit the body, because when you get to game 7, that's when it's going to matter. But heard enough from us. Let's hear from a player who is in the series. Jonah Gadjovich from the Florida Panthers, a forward, was a black ace for them last year, playing for them this year. Also probably has the best beard in the series, and you're going to hear about that too. Here is our interview with Jonah Gadjovich.
Jonah, thanks for joining us. Before we get to the hockey point of this, I just have to say, everybody thinks they have cute kids. Your kids are the cutest darn kids I've ever seen. Congratulations on the twins. I know there was the picture last year of them in the cup, and now they're motoring around like crazy people.
Thank you. Yeah, no, they're oh man, they're so much fun. You know, like you said, you know, when we put them in the cup, they were so small they both fit in the top of it at the same time, which is pretty crazy, right? But now they're up at the glass here watching practice, motoring around. So you know, it's been such a fun year, and you know, I just love watching them grow up.
So a lot has changed. You talked about that. The other change is you're in the lineup now. You're playing in the Stanley Cup final. Last year you were watching the Stanley Cup final and you were able to get on the ice when they won. But, you know, so much has changed for you personally. What's this ride been like in the last year?
It's been incredible. You know, I feel like I've come a long way, and you know, I feel like I've learned so much, and I think that's just you know, a credit to the people around the rink here, all the staff, and you know, strength coaches, trainers, coaches, teammates. Like, I just feel like I've learned so much as not only a player but as a person, and you know, I just feel like I am, you know, trying to learn and continue to grow, and you know, it's been such a fun ride, and so incredible to have this opportunity to be in the lineup, and you know, to be playing a game that I love, and at the highest level, and this is obviously the pinnacle of our sport, and you know, I've just been trying to take it in stride and enjoy every second of it.
You know, it's interesting to me because I think you were talking about this maybe before game 1 of the conference final. You were asked a question. My timing might be off, but you were asked a question about what it was like, you know, last year. How did you feel when you weren't in it? And you said, listen, I was still a part of it. I was still in everything. But what is the difference when you know that, you know, your name's going to be on that board too, and you're going to be a part of it on the ice, not just in the meetings, not just in practice and at morning skates and things like that?
Yeah, no, it definitely feels different. You know, I think last year I just wanted to be on the ice battling with the guys I love so bad, you know, and this year I have that chance, and you know, every guy goes out there night in, night out, and lays their body on the line, and I'm grateful to be able to do that this year.
So what have these first 2 games been like? Describe the level up that you know, in the intensity, the execution, and everything. Is this the best hockey you've been a part of?
Definitely. Yeah, no, definitely. It's man, it's so fast, it's so crisp. You know, not a lot of room for error out there. Obviously, they're such an incredible team, and it's we've got our work cut out for us, right? And for me, I just try to focus on what I can do for our team and try to contribute any way I can. And at the end of the day, I'm just trying to enjoy this as well. I think one day I'll be looking back and I want to be able to say that I had a damn good time doing this, instead of saying I was so stressed or so worried that I hated every second of it. I want to be able to look back and just say, I had a blast and it was, some of the best times in my life.
You mentioned battling, and I wanted to ask you, I've been wanting to ask this since the final started. You watch these games, and guys are diving in front of the Bouchard shot, which is, 100 miles an hour. Ekblad blocks that shot yesterday and can't even close his hand. Like, there's some really tough guys that play hockey, and it seems to ramp up the deeper you get in the playoffs. But what is that hockey mind like? Is it almost contagious that you feel like you have to do it because everybody else is?
I mean, I think so, yes. I think at the same time, though, I don't know if it's like I have to do this. It's like, hey, this guy's doing it. I want to do it too. I want to eat a shot. I want to do whatever it takes to win this game. And that's the mindset we have as a group. It's these guys that are in that room. Like, I think everyone can see how physically tough they are by playing through things they play through or taking a hit to make a play, whatever it is. You can see that on the ice, but I think maybe more so than that physical strength is their mental strength in that room down there. And just all the adversity that comes our way, I just don't think that we get fazed by it. I think that they've done a good job of preparing and learning how to take things in stride and just sticking to what makes us successful as a group. And we know what we have to do at the end of the day, and I think we do a good job of executing that.
So you mentioned you don't want to be stressed, but obviously matchups are a huge part of the Stanley Cup final. They're trying to get Connor McDavid against you guys any chance they can, right? They're looking for that favorable matchup, especially at home. That was the first two games. Ice the puck. You guys are stuck out there. Here comes Connor and Leon. A little stressful, right?
Well, I mean, yeah, of course. I think, yeah, like at the back of your mind is you don't want to mess up and cost your team, a goal or a game or whatever it is. But at the same time, it's like, hey, we're here for a reason too. Obviously, not the same caliber, not even close. But like I said, we're here, we're on the ice, and we have a job to do, and we just try to execute the game plan and the job that's in front of us. And obviously, in a situation like that, it's change as fast as you can, but but I think we're also confident in, hey, like, defensively, structurally, we know what's expected of us, and we're just going to try to do the best we can, and the coaches and our teammates know that.
So it's obviously all about hockey right now. I mean, this is the Stanley Cup final, of course it is, but how do you turn it off? What do you do? I mean, Sean brought up the Twins, right? But like, what do you do to turn it off? Can you turn it off right now, or is it still just the brain just going all about hockey?
Definitely, a topic of discussion almost 24/7, family, friends wanting to talk about it. At the rink, we're here a lot, and it's obviously on our minds. But yeah, I mean, for me to get away from it, obviously when I'm here, I'm just dive head first into being a dad and a husband, and that's my favorite job in the world and the best job in the world. So I definitely am able to separate work and my home life like that. And then on the road, been playing poker with the boys. We've been watching movies as a team, and going for dinners, going to Dairy Queen, like all that fun stuff, man. We're just trying to enjoy ourselves, and like I said, I think this is for a lot of the guys on the team, this is their third time in 3 years, which is incredible. But they're pretty calm, cool, and collected. They've been here, and they know what's expected, and so there's different ways like that to kind of separate it, but it's definitely on our minds a lot.
Well, I did want to ask you too. So one of the things that I really appreciate about your team is this laser focus, right? And also this belief of, this is where we belong. This is where we're supposed to be. What is that like when you're around the rest of your team and that experience of, like, the focus is always there, the equilibrium is there, like you guys are always able to get back to a level, and it's also just this feeling of we belong, like this is where we're supposed to be. What's that like in the room?
It's it's a pretty like calming thing, I think. You know, when I first signed here, I mean, this is my second year here, so when I first signed here, that first training camp, you know, they were talking about we're going back to the Stanley Cup final. We're going to be playing in Game 7. This is what it's going to be like. This is what we have to do. And it's been like that for 2 years now. And I don't think it's a fluke that this team has gotten here 3 years in a row. I think they have built something, and they're continuing to build. We're continuing to build. And, yeah, I think it's just that confidence, that experience. And, you know, it's such a loosey-goosey room, too. Like, we have so much fun in the intermissions before games, playing sewer ball, like all that stuff. Like I don't even know. Like, I mean, I guess we're thinking about the game, but we're just enjoying ourselves. We're having a good time. And then, you know, we know how to dial it in like that. Like, it's almost like a flip the switch and, hey, you know what? We know what we have to do. We got a job to do, and we're going to do that job.
Wow, we broke some news here. The Florida Panthers are a loosey-goosey bunch. I would have never known. 2 questions that go along with that. You mentioned Dairy Queen. What's your Blizzard order, and what is it like when you guys roll up to the Dairy Queen?
Definitely a lot of eyes on us. You know, couple cars driving by, giving us the finger, a few things like that. But you know, it's pretty chill for the most part. And what did I get? I got the Score Blizzard. Which, I mean, I just came along for the ride. Obviously, who doesn't like ice cream? But I don't digest dairy very well. So, I mean, I had a little bit of that, and I was paying for it the next day. But it was just fun to be with the boys, and, you know, went for a little walk, and it was a good time.
Oh, so you went in Edmonton.
We went in Edmonton after a team
enemy
dinner,
territory.
Yeah, enemy territory, exactly, yeah.
Wow, that's...
Yeah, the first couple times I didn't go because, like I said, like I can't do dairy. But this time the boys were heading over, and I was like, hey, you know what? I'm going to come. I'll get a little small Blizzard and, you know, have a few bites, and it was a good time.
They brought you for protection, right?
It could have been, yeah. I don't know. that might be why I got invited.
All right, we obviously know playoff beards are a thing. I'm looking at your picture right now that is on your player card on the NHL.com page, and nobody can see it, but I'll show it to you. So you got a beard,
yeah,
right? Is this the best beard you've ever grown in your life?
I think so, yeah. I think this is definitely the longest, the bushiest. It's kind of gross, to be honest. It's always in my mouth. And, like, man, a couple weeks ago, I was eating breakfast downstairs, and my eggs order is 3 over medium, and, you know, I'm eating my eggs, and then, you know, some of the guys were like, hey, like, you got some eggs in your beard. And I'm like trying to like brush it out, but I couldn't find it. I couldn't get it. So I had Marshy picking eggs out of my beard, like getting the yolk out for me. So it's kind of nasty, but I'm just enjoying it.
You got to keep it, right? You can't even trim it. Nothing, right? Nothing goes near it.
Nothing.
What about the kids? Are they picking at it?
Yeah, so I'll go in to give them a kiss, and like they don't know, they're just grabbing it, pulling it. So it's yeah, I guess they're having fun with it too. But yeah, just enjoying it, and you know, it's along for the ride too.
Back to the games for a minute. What has these first 2 games been like? It's been so tight. We're going to play game 3 tomorrow. It's actually game 4 because we've already played 3 overtime periods. It just seems like there's not a second to relax.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think at this stage of the game, it's just, you know, 2 incredible teams going head to head, and, you know, there's not a lot of time and space out there, and, you know, it's a physical, hard, fast game. You know, like I kind of talked about earlier, it's you know, you have to be physically tough, but also mentally tough at this point, and, you know, but at the end of the day, you know, I can speak for myself. I'm just having fun on the bench, on the ice, leading up to it, trying to soak it all in. And, you know, we're, you know, obviously grateful to have got the split there in Edmonton, and, you know, super excited to be playing at home in front of our fans tomorrow.
You get the opportunity to play in front of your fans. You saw that building. You know, I mean, you played in that building in Edmonton. It was raucous. It was nuts. Those fans are great. The turn here of getting the home game, you were a part of it last year, but you weren't on the ice. What is that feeling like when you come out for the start of the game? Not warm-ups. I mean the start of the game, and the place is the lights are off, the spotlights are going around, the music's blaring, people are going nuts. What is that feeling going to be like for you?
Man, it's, you know, I can speak to what it's been like for playoffs. Obviously, I think it's going to even be on another level tomorrow, but you just feel it's electric. It's electric out there. And, obviously we love playing in front of our fans, and, they're so loud and cheering us on, and, it makes you feel lighter almost. You're kind of high stepping it around the ice, and, it's like, oh, geez, I feel like I'm, 180 pounds out here. But, you just try to enjoy it. There's times, especially during the anthem, I just catch myself, I take a few deep breaths and I look around and I just appreciate where I'm at.
So the first question I asked to Brad Marchand next is going to be about picking eggs out of your beard, right?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I've had a handful of times where the boys are kind of saying, "Hey, you got something in your beard, man," unless I got my phone screen out or something, I can't see where it's at. Just kind of digging, I'll try to pick it out, but it gets deeper in there. So yeah, he got some egg out of my beard a couple weeks ago.
Well, you got about a week and a half left of it, and that's about it. And he can shave it. But we really appreciate you jumping on with us. Thanks so much. All right.
Of course. Thank you, guys.
Obviously, great stuff with Jonah Gadjevich. We have had some players on who have been good guests. I think he's the best guest we've had as a player. Maybe that's a recency bias. I don't know, Sean, but the beard story alone killed it.
And as a bonus, he goes with the Dairy Queen story.
Yeah.
Things I'm not admitting to you. Right there. No, he was fantastic. And you could see, he talked about the room being loosey-goosey, and he fits right in. And that room, Paul Maurice talks about it all the time, the room. The room takes care of itself. The room is magic. When I came here, I understood this was a different place. And I've tried to get people to explain it to me, and you really can't, but he came close. Like, it's just loose. They're professionals, but they're loose. They have fun. They bring in Nate Schmidt. Nobody has more fun than that guy. It's just a room where people are allowed to be themselves. There's no overbearing, right? There's no Panther way. There is a Panther way, but the Panther way is to be yourself.
Well, that's exactly right. That's what it is. That's the Panther way. Be yourself. Come in, and Paul Maurice talks about this. Do the few things that we require of everybody. As long as you do those things, then you can be who you are. Because look at the personalities in that room, from Matthew Tkachuk to Brad Marchand to Gadjevich to Nate Schmidt to quieter, Barkov, Lundell, Listerinen, all the Finns, Mikkola. But Mikkola, they'll rave about the way he is. They don't understand a word he's saying sometimes, but they love the guy, right? So many varying personalities in that room. Bobrovsky, I mean, he's a goalie, and he's fits right into what a goalie is.
What are you trying to say, Dan?
I think he's a little different. In the most positive light, different. But it is a room that's just filled with different personalities. And Paul Maurice doesn't take a lot of credit for this, even though he should. Bill Zito doesn't take a lot of credit for this, even though he should. There's an agenda. Well, maybe not agenda is a bad word, but there's a checklist of items that you have to do to be a Florida Panther right now. And as long as you do those things, you can be whoever you are. But if you don't, I think you get called out pretty quick. In fact, Nate Schmidt was telling a story he wasn't telling a story. Elliot Friedman was talking about this at one point, and Nate Schmidt confirmed it, that in a preseason game, he did something on the ice. He came back to the bench. He wouldn't say what it was. And the reaction on the bench was, we don't do that here. And it was a lesson learned right away. He was off the checklist. He had to get back on the checklist, and then he could be Nate Schmidt.
Yeah, and I think that the Edmonton Oilers have moved a little bit in that direction, right? Connor McDavid's an intense human being, and he dominates that room because he's the biggest star in the world. Like, how do you not defer to Connor McDavid? But it seems to me, as steely-eyed as Connor McDavid still is, especially with us, there's a different feel to this Oiler team. They're a little tiny bit looser than they were last year. And some of it's just familiarity. They know what they're doing. They know what the press conferences are like. They know what the travel's like. They know what everything's like. And they have one goal in mind, but they've gone about it in a slightly less intense way. Not in their execution, but in their internal expectations.
Yeah. By the way, I do think if Connor McDavid is to win the Stanley Cup, we are going to see him loosen up a little bit more. There's a lot of pressure on this guy to live up to that expectation of winning the Stanley Cup. So, hey, 1-1 series.
Especially because you put the expectation on that he can never be a great player if he doesn't win the Cup.
Yeah, I'm the only one, sure. Yeah, that just this guy right here, 100%, just me. All right, listen, we got a 1-1 series. It's great. Game 3, Monday night. It's going to be fantastic. The series has been fantastic so far, but There are other things going on in the hockey world. There's only 2 teams playing.
How dare other things go on in
Other
the hockey
things
world?
are going on, and there's coaching changes. The Dallas Stars have fired Pete DeBoer. This is your reward for going to the Western Conference Final year after year after year. You lose your job. But I think we all kind of saw it coming. And I kind of think Pete DeBoer saw it coming too.
You would hope that he saw it coming, and that was the reason why he was the way he was after Game 7. Look, I've covered Pete DeBoer. Game 5, sorry. I've covered Pete DeBoer for a long time, since he was with the Devils.
Yep.
Right? And through finals and through Western Conference finals.
Well, he started here, remember?
Yeah.
He started here.
And actually went to Finland with him this year. They went with the Panthers. Gracious, really smart hockey mind. I think the pressure was so high this year on the Dallas Stars after getting to the Western Conference Final the last 2 years that as it imploded, it was so hard to deal with. And I think Pete may have thought that if I lose this game, I lose my job. And the frustration was palpable afterwards. I think there's parts of that press conference that he would like to take back. I don't think you want to throw your franchise goaltender who just signed an 8-year deal under the bus and say it's a huge sample size and he can't beat the Edmonton Oilers, a team you're probably going to play in the final for the next 5 years if you get there, because they're not going anywhere. But what is it, 7 conference finals in the last 8 years, and he's looking for his 4th job? It's a tough business.
It's a tough business, but you know what? If he wants to, and I would assume he does because he's still chasing it, he's going to coach again. I would venture to guess he's going to coach again next season, right? It's at some point, somewhere, someone is going to lose their job. There's going to be a coaching change, and the first call is probably going to go to Pete DeBoer, and rightfully so. He's a really good coach. He's just maybe he's just one of those guys that has a little bit of a shorter shelf life. I don't know, but he's been around. He's been cycled through a bunch of different jobs, but wherever he goes, his teams do well. But he just hasn't been able to put him over the top.
You know what? You look at this guy here in Florida, Paul Maurice, burnt out in Winnipeg, walked away. I can't get to these guys anymore. I'm doing a disservice by still being here. And then he comes here, and he's like a miracle worker. And Nate Schmidt, who had him in both places, was like, I saw a guy in Winnipeg at the end that didn't have any answers, that couldn't get to the team, knew he couldn't get to the team. And then I come here, and he has all the answers. Like, he needed some time. He took all the good things from Winnipeg and said, I'm going to use these when I go forward. And he took all the bad things from Winnipeg and said, I need to change these things, and I need to get rid of these things. And I think that's what Pete needs to do.
And they're really close. So they can have that conversation. Not now, not today, but they will have that conversation is my guess because they're very good friends. So now Jim Nill, the general manager of the Dallas Stars, where do they go? And, you'll see names out there. Peter Laviolette, it's an obvious name that's out there because he's a veteran coach. That's a win-now team. Okay, fine. Nobody's talking about a guy they have in-house. Misha Donskov. He was one of the first hires for Vegas, and then he wanted to get on the bench for Vegas, and he was on the bench. I think he became an assistant coach. He was working more in the background for Vegas. I think he became assistant coach when Pete DeBoer was still there. Stayed there with Bruce Cassidy, went to Dallas. Mike Heika, who works for the Dallas Stars, covers the team for them, writes for their website, wrote a story on Misha Donskov right around Four Nations about how everybody in Dallas was talking about him as like our secret weapon. He's our guy. Like, he's the one that does all the work. Even Pete DeBoer was saying this too. The guy you don't want to get rid of. The guy if he leaves us, he's going to go somewhere else, become a head coach, and it's going to be we're going to be the ones holding the bag. It's not going to be good. In the Four Nations, John Cooper had all head coaches on his staff and one assistant. It was Misha Donskov. So I don't know. People aren't really talking about it because Dallas is that win-now team and whatnot. But I wouldn't be surprised if he's a high on the list of Jim Nill's high on Jim Nill's list. And I wouldn't be surprised if he gets the job. There's familiarity, obviously, and the players like him. There wouldn't be a massive change, but they think really highly of this guy, Misha Donskov. So we can talk about other names out there, but that's the one that I'm looking at.
And it's a good one to look at, except for the pressure that's on that team.
Yeah.
right? It's to win now. And what's the worst thing you can have if you want to win now is a coach making his first kick at the can in the playoffs when everything changes, right? Knobloch did it last year, and he talked about he didn't win.
He got to Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Final.
He fell down 3-0.
Got to Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Final.
And he didn't win, and he said it's so different. It's so different this year. I feel like a different man because I understand it. It's not that it was too big for him. It was that he didn't understand it.
Okay, but don't you think the Dallas Stars would take Misha Donskov getting his learning experience by taking his team to the Stanley Cup Final, even if they lose? They'll take that. Well, they want to win, I mean, obviously. But, yeah, I think they'll be okay with that.
I do too, but I think if you're Jim Nill and you're thinking about I need to win, do I take somebody more experienced? I think the one thing that they need to do, right, he's made some really out-of-the-box decisions with management, with everything. So I don't think he's afraid of doing it. The one thing, whoever goes into that room has to be a player's guy.
Yeah.
They're burnt.
I agree. That's why I said Misha Donskov.
Yeah.
You know,
But some guys are made to be assistants, and there's no shame in that.
No.
Right? When you look at some of it, and I think it's more prevalent in football where it's more specialized, but there's guys all the time who are offensive and defensive coordinators who become coaches, and then a year later they're offensive and defensive coordinators again because they're not CEOs. They're hockey people.
There's a guy here in Florida, Jamie Compon is that guy, right? I mean, he's been an assistant coach forever in this league. I think he won with L.A. He's now won with Florida. So, yeah.
Mike Kitchen's another guy.
Yep, absolutely, an assistant coach. But it's a name. It's a name to look at, I think, Misha Donskov. We'll find out soon enough. I mean, they don't fire Pete DeBoer when they do without having an idea of where they want to go with this. So that's one. The Pittsburgh Penguins hired Dan Muse, and the Boston Bruins hired Marco Sturm. We could start with whatever one you want. Well, we'll start closer to home for you, Sean. Boston Bruins, Marco Sturm. Listen, he played for them, coached. He coached in Ontario of the American Hockey League. He coached the German national team. This is not a surprise to me that he's getting his first NHL head coaching job, but he's getting it in a place that he's very familiar with. To me, it's not so much the coach there because I think he's going to be fine. It's they have a lot of cap space and they need to build it back up a little bit.
Yeah, and some of it's going to have to be with youth, right? Like, so here's a guy who's worked in the minors, who's worked with a lot of young players. Look, Marco Sturm scored one of the biggest goals in Bruins history, right?
Scored it at Fenway.
In Fenway Park. I think he's going to be fine. The work he did with the German national team, and as he's helped that program grow to where they've become a player on the national stage, the German players can't speak enough about him, the ones in the league and the ones who came before him. Uwe Krupp talked about, how qualified he is, Dennis Seidenberg, all of these guys, who know him very well. So that's not the concern. The concern is what the Bruins are going to look like, what the team he is going to coach is going to look like, because they're not a good enough team right now. They need to add, and they need to add a lot.
And the expectations of what it's going to be placed on that team too, right? Because they need to add. They need to add a lot, like you said. They didn't make the playoffs. It was a very disappointing year for them. They traded a lot of guys, Brad Marchand being one of them. They don't have a big prospect pool. They just don't. Like, they haven't had opportunities necessarily to have a big prospect pool. They've traded a lot, but the guys they've drafted really have not developed very well either. So it's got to be, you got to manage expectations there, but it's Boston, so
there's no
managing that expectations.
Yeah. They're expected to be in the playoffs.
Yeah, absolutely. So Marco Sturm goes there. Dan Muse. So that one I think came out a little bit of a left field to go to the Pittsburgh Penguins. Maybe a lot out of left field, maybe foul territory, and then came back in. But he was an assistant with the Rangers the last 2 years, and before that, he was a head coach at the U.S. National Team Development Program. He was an assistant in Nashville with Peter Laviolette and an assistant with the Rangers with Peter Laviolette as well. High energy guy. Watch him practice. And I did often this year. Just high energy, always involved. Seems like a player guy, teaching, coaching, all of that. Not the CEO type. This is a guy who's going to get his hands dirty with the players. And you understand the reasoning for the Pittsburgh Penguins and why they go that route. But they still have Sidney Crosby, and they still have Evgeny Malkin, and they still have Chris Letang, and those guys got to be on board with this, or it's not going to work out. And I don't worry about Crosby jumping on board, but you do wonder, like, how is this going to go? Like, to me, Dan Muse has to win over Sidney Crosby to then be able to coach the team the way he wants to coach the team.
Yeah, and I think it tips Kyle Dubas's hand, right? Like, he's going to get young.
Yeah.
He's going to
going
trade
that way
players.
anyway.
He's going to trade players. He's going to try and rebuild on the fly, I guess. But he's going to do it with younger players, and that's where Muse comes in, right? He was a USHL coach. He was with the national team program, had a ton of success there. So I think that's what the future holds for Pittsburgh. But you're right. It is Crosby and all of those guys who are like, is this how I'm going to play out my last couple of years?
Yeah.
And it's going to be a yin and a yang, right? Like,
So from a Penguin perspective, if Sidney Crosby is telling you, I'm all in, I've bought in, this is my team, I don't want to go anywhere, I know what we're doing, then this is the right move. Because if you're saying that, then you're on board with this. Then you know you're on board with this, right? And I think that's where they're at right now. So the Penguins' perspective on how they're thinking is, there's nobody better to teach our young players how to be in this league than Sidney Crosby. There's nobody better in the National Hockey League right now than to show young players what it takes and how you act as a professional and the work ethic you need. That's 87. That's Sidney Crosby. So from a Penguins perspective, that's the advantage that they have. So Dan Muse can come in and almost reinforce all of what Crosby's going to do for this team if he's all bought in, if he wants to stay there. Right now he is. We'll see how long that lasts, right? With Sidney Crosby, the professional that he is, I don't think we're ever going to know until the final, until a move is made, right? But if Crosby has any doubts, that's where the disconnect could be, and that is where it could make Dan Muse's job harder.
yeah, I don't think there's any doubts. I think Sidney Crosby will do everything he can
Yes.
to help Dan Muse because that's who he is, and he will bleed black and gold until the day he no longer puts that sweater on. But look, I think that the Penguins are trying to get the next Bednar or Wasowski.
Yep.
Right? They're going that route. The young guy who is in his first job but speaks the language of the players. But this is a whole different situation. Kyle Dubas has no loyalty to Sidney Crosby other than franchise loyalty, right? If you're going to rebuild, what does 87 bring you as a chip?
A lot, but that's really a hard one. That's really a hard one. So, yeah, I mean, listen, I think, we don't know, but I think there would be relief on Kyle Dubas's part if Sidney Crosby were to come to him and be like, I get it. I know what you're doing. I just can't play out the rest of my career like this. Let's see what we can work out. There'll be relief on Kyle Dubas's part. But he'll also be losing a guy who is the best at showing what it takes in this league. And that would be a big miss, and they can't replace that.
No, and he would be a villain.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't matter how logical it is.
He would be Kyle Dubas would be the villain.
Yeah, it's
Oh,
a franchise-altering event, right? And I'm not saying it's going to happen. I'm just saying when you look at it, as a GM, your job is never to close a door,
No.
right? You always got to think about it. Like, if Brad Tree living in Toronto right now isn't thinking about Austin Matthews and what he could bring as they try and rebuild themselves with the cap hell that they're going to be in and as they try and sign other players and everything else, like if he's not thinking about what kind of haul he can get back, he's not doing his job.
Can't fall in love with your players. You can fall in love with the people. You can't fall in love with them as players. So last one, which was maybe the most interesting one of them all, is David Quinn going back to the New York Rangers as an assistant coach under Mike Sullivan. Listen, David Quinn was an assistant under Sullivan in Pittsburgh the last couple of years. They're really close. There's the BU connection. The coach's room is going to be BU, and a BC guy, by the way, with Joe Sacco going and Ty Hennis. But David Quinn was the head coach of the Rangers. He was fired a week after Chris Drury became the general manager. Drury, a BU guy, fired him, and now he's going back as an assistant coach. And there's a number of players that are there still that played under David Quinn when he was a head coach there. I think two things. One, I credit David Quinn for saying, you know what, this is an NHL coaching job. I believe, and I can suck it up and go back. I don't care that I'm going back as an assistant. There's a lot of pride that the man has, and I don't know if he's sucking up the pride or whatever it is, but he's going back and he's understanding he can try to make a difference there again, it's just in a different role. But I also think it speaks to the power that Mike Sullivan has, and that's maybe the biggest thing of this whole thing.
That is the biggest thing, and it's Mike Sullivan saying, "This is my show now. You've hired me." But the pride doesn't matter. Dude, Larry Robinson won 9 trillion cups, and he's in the Hall of Fame, and Lou said, "You're no good for me. Get out." And then 3 weeks later, he's like, we need some help. But coach is sick. We're not in the place we need to be. Can you come back and help as an assistant? And Larry Robinson said, "Yeah, I'll do it." And he helped the Devils in unbelievable ways.
There's Lou loyalty in this league, though. That's a little different, though.
But it's not. It's understanding that it's a hockey job.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter whether you're the head coach or the assistant coach. You know what? If you're a teacher, it's a lot better being the assistant coach because you don't have to answer to you or me or anybody else. You can be buddy-buddy. You can be buddy-buddy with the players. You can be buddy-buddy with the media off the record in New York.
Yep.
And
definitely off the record in New York.
You don't have to answer to anybody. You're not making the decisions. It's an NHL lifestyle job without the NHL stress.
Right. But it speaks to the power that Mike Sullivan has. Mike Sullivan clearly controls. I'm sure when he got hired for that job, he told Chris Drury, "I'm hiring my guys. I am hiring my staff, and my say is final on this." Because I don't know the reaction from Chris Drury when they brought. I mean, he knows that David Quinn is a good coach, right? I mean, he knows he is. The other thing too is he left New York. He then went to San Jose, and it wasn't a good time in San Jose. And he got fired right before they picked Macklin Celebrini. Like, he did what he was supposed to do there. It was miserable. Couldn't win, not given a team to win. And then I think he's having a lot of fun. Like, I think he's really enjoying this aspect of the NHL life, of being an assistant, of what you just talked about. I think he's just really, because he loves hockey, he loves being in the nitty-gritty of it, and that's what he was doing at BU when he was the head coach there. And I think he's just enjoying it, and it's another opportunity to keep enjoying it.
All right, so before we go, Mike Sullivan's the head coach now. Quinner's back. I'm not going to understand anything that's said in the coach's room, but they were almost here last year. They were in the Eastern Conference Finals.
The Rangers.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not those two.
No,
the Rangers.
The Rangers. Are we talking about them in May next year?
Oh, I don't know. Let's see what they do. It's way too early to say because I don't know what they're going to do with the roster. I don't know what they're going to do, especially with the back end, which needs improvement. I want to see how bought in the players are to all of this, right? There's a lot of questions there. I can't answer that question. Same with Boston. Like, it's almost impossible to answer that right now.
They're not the same because Boston hasn't been good.
Yeah,
for a couple of years, and the Rangers were supposed to be here.
They were supposed to. Yeah. So I do think that there's going to be a bump. I think there'll be a Sullivan bump, but we got to see what that roster looks like. Listen, there's openings, right? There's certainly openings in the Metropolitan Division. I don't think Washington's going to be as good. I don't think Carolina. We'll see where they're at. I know they'll be what the Hurricanes are. We know what they're going to be. The Devils, where are they going to be at? So the Islanders, there's an opportunity there, no question about it. The more power is very clearly in the Atlantic Division right now. But those are questions for another day. We got a 1-1 Stanley Cup Final, Sean. Game 3 Monday night. I'm jacked up for it.
I'm ready, and we know we're going back to Edmonton now. So. Yep. I didn't get to go to the Czech place in Edmonton.
Bistro Praha.
So now I got a chance, although we're not in Edmonton for very long for Game 5. So who knows? But Game 3, like you said, tomorrow, going to be fantastic. Can't wait.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it. And as always, the podcast brought to you by Skip. Skip to the good part. You can get groceries, meals, and essentials delivered right to your door on Skip. Enjoy the Stanley Cup Final.